Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this is the podcast for you.
What is happening, team? Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Today, we continue our mini-series breaking down the barriers to going and hunting in the North American big game system. We're actually going to be talking about a hunt that's very close to my heart at the moment, and that is moose and caribou. So we've got Austin Atkinson from Huntin Fool, our trusted advisor, on the line, and he's going to be giving us advice on sort of organising a moose hunt or organising a caribou hunt in the future. As you hear, it's probably one of these things, especially with caribou, where you want to be organising a hunt sooner rather than later with a diminishing amount of opportunities and significantly increasing price tag for these hunts in the future. So make sure to listen to this podcast. Make sure to get as much information as possible. Obviously, it's something that's meant to start getting the cogs turning, just ticking along in your brain, but it's something where I'd advise talking to Huntin Fool if you want to organise one of these hunts, because they've got connections with so many advisors, all very experienced. But more importantly, you hear so many horrific stories with outfitters where they say something and it just doesn't turn out exactly as you planned. And especially with these trips where you're spending a lot of money, you want to know that the outfitters you're hunting with come with an assurance guarantee from the Huntin Fool team that you're going to have an incredible hunt. And, especially, when you're spending money like what we're going to be talking about, you really want to know that it comes with the confidence of the team over there. We back the Huntin Fool team 100%. So if you want to reach out to them, there's two ways you can do it. You can email them at applications@huntinfool.com. So that's HUNTINFOOL.com, or you can go to their website, which is www.huntinfool.com, and go to the Contact Us section. Fill that out, and someone will get in contact with you promptly to help you, whether it be applying for tags or whether it be going and organising your moose hunt. At the end of this podcast, we'll also jump into our FAQ section where we answer your listener questions. If you have a listener question, please send us an email at info@twinelements.com.au with the subject line FAQ, or equally, you can send us a message on one of our Instagram accounts, being Aidan Doomstis Outdoors, James Doomstis Outdoors, or the main Twin Elements account, and we will get you on the podcast in the future and answer your listener question. But without further ado, we'll jump into this podcast on chasing moose and chasing caribou.
Numa Outdoors is our camouflage clothing of choice. The team has formulated a durable, breathable, quiet, and comfortable camouflage lineup, suitable for all terrains, season, and pursuits, with a great pattern to keep you concealed. You may have recently seen us running the Renegade lineup in our recent adventures up north. We're pleased to announce that Numa products are available in Australia, so head to Venture Hunting Outdoors website to check them out for yourself.
Well, legends, welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. By now, I shouldn't have to introduce our almost co-host, really. I feel like we need to give him an honorary cut and share into the Twin Elements podcast with how often he's been in here. He's pretty much like family now. He, I think it's fifth episode maybe that fourth episode that we're jumping into with Austin Atkinson from Huntin Fool. Now, so it's absolute pleasure to have you back on. We appreciate everyone here that's listening to the podcast, including Aidan and I. Really appreciate you giving up your time to be here and breaking down those barriers of entry for people to go and do the hunts they've always dreamed about, and giving them a bit more information, hopefully just giving that motivation to go and find that opportunity to chase the North American dream and get some new species or new hunts. So thank you for coming on the podcast again. We really appreciate it.
Of course. It's good to help out and show you what opportunities there are here.
So today we're going to be jumping into a hunt that I'm very keen to hear a bit of information about, and that is going to be moose hunts in the lower 48 and Canada and Alaska. But also we're going to be doing teaming that up and joining that with caribou opportunities as well. So we think what we'll probably do is start with the moose hunts and go into maybe a bit about them, just the different of species of moose and where they live, and then a lot of the hunts for moose are either tags that may take quite a long time to draw, so we're going to sort of speak about that, and then what other opportunities exist with just purchasing a tag and what populations there are, and probably just break it down in terms of pricing for you guys, because the next podcast we're also going to do is sheep and mountain goat with Austin, and we're sort of talking about pretty unique opportunities and hunts here that hunts that people most likely, unless you see yourself moving to Alaska, I guess, aren't going to be really hunting these species every year. These are pretty once in a lifetime hunts, as we'd like to describe them. If you have a big enough budget, obviously opportunities open up for you more so, but for a lot of people, these are hunts that are pretty special and unique. So we're just going to tell you about the opportunities, where the price tags are sort of sitting currently in the market, and where you might be trying to book or look for your moose or caribou hunt in this podcast, depending on what species you're chasing and how big a specimen you're chasing as well. So we'll jump into what species have you got for moose in the world, really. I guess we're sort of talking outside of the US now, aren't we, as well, a lot of the time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, moose are probably more popular than they've ever been. I don't know if it's just because of how big of a deer species they are, how big the antlers are, right? It's kind of a macho thing. I want to shoot a moose because it's so big, and they're fun to hunt. They're not as vocal as an elk, but a lot of the rut tactics are very similar. You can call moose in. They fight. They're territorial. They respond to cow calls, and they're big targets. A lot of people really like to eat moose. Moose meat's very good, and the opportunities, moose are doing pretty good overall population wise in certain parts of the world, and we are all trying to hunt them ourselves. But I like to break it down into basically the 3 recognized species of moose that we consider for like the Super Slam or under the Grand Slam Club, and that's Shiras moose, which are the smallest variety, and they primarily live in the western portion of the United States. All the states like where I live here in Utah, Colorado, Nevada, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, those are all Shiras moose, and smallest of the 3 moose species. But next would be the Canadian moose, which would exist obviously in Canada, in the southern half of Canada, all the way from east to west, with the eastern side trickling down into the northeastern part of the United States. So our states like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, in the northeast corner of the United States, they have Canadian moose there. But most people that hunt Canadian moose will go to Canada. That's the cheapest of the moose species, but it's the mid-grade on size. So those moose are bigger than Shiras moose as far as antler size, but smaller than their cousins further north. And that's always interesting. The further north you go, latitude, the bigger the animals have to be to survive. Right? I'm speaking generally here, but this is going way back to evolution or whatever you want to, genetic, natural selection, whatever you want to call it. Bigger animals live further north where it's more harsh, and smaller animals will live closer to the equator. But that's true for moose. The biggest ones are up north. As you come further south into Canada, they get smaller, and come into the United States with the Shiras, they're even smaller. So go northern part of Canada, meaning the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and then into Alaska. All of those moose are a different subspecies, and they're called the Alaska Yukon moose. It doesn't matter if they live in Canada or Alaska, it's still the same species of moose. But those are the biggest, widest antlers, biggest bodies, and typically that's what most people want to kill one of those. But if it's outside of your budget or too far to go, Canada moose is probably the next cheapest or easiest to get if you just want a moose. So those are kind of the three that we usually talk about.
This might be a bit of a red herring for you, but what type of moose do they, because I know Russia is another place that they have moose. Do you know is that a different subspecies over there, or is that what's...
Yeah, you get into a whole different world. I mean, I would call them Alaska Yukon moose, but they're not, because they're not in Alaska or the Yukon. So Russia gets into, they've got a European moose, they've got a Amur moose, they've got a Kamchatka moose, all just subspecies, if you will. But do they look the same? Yes. Most people that hunt in eastern Russia, they're on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Can't say that word today. But they're on that peninsula, which is very close to Alaska, very similar terrain, very similar sized moose. They just don't get hunted as much. Genetically, they get some bigger, older bulls. And so there's some really big moose in Russia. Most hunters are not too keen on going to Russia right now. If the war ended between Russia and Ukraine, I think they'd be more keen to going back. They're still issuing travel visas. We still have some clients going to Russia right now. But you can get a really big moose for a lot cheaper than Alaska right now if you're willing to go to Russia. And they did just open up bow hunting, 3 years ago? So bow hunting is very new in Russia. It's now allowed when before it never was. So good opportunity if you're willing to travel to Russia and jump all the way across the country.
Yeah, cool. And excuse the ignorance here with the moose species, but like, you know, Shiras and Canadian moose, like across that northern border, like other than the size of the animal, like, I don't know, because what's the chance that one just wanders over the border?
No, the moose know exactly where the border is. Yeah, you're speaking what we talk about all the time, and these are arbitrary boundaries that we've created. Anytime that species, cross the continent, and then we draw a line, like in Alaska, we have a bear line that says if they're north of this degree latitude or this parallel, then they're a grizzly bear. If they're south, they're a brown bear. Well, we just made that boundary up. And it's the same thing with moose. SCI, or Safari Club International, has a different moose line than Boone and Crockett, Grand Slam Club. They all have different moose lines. For example, SCI will say that it is a Canadian moose north of a certain line in Alberta, when anything south of that is a Shiras. And Boone and Crockett says, no, a Shiras is anything inside the United States. We'll draw it at the international border. So nobody's in alignment, because like you say, do they look the same? Yes. Are they the same moose species? Well, they can interbreed. They look the same. I would say they are. We've made up some of these designations as wildlife people.
Classic. No, that's cool. It's just more, like just hearing the different. So really, what you're paying for or the experience you're going for it's all the same moose. They all have the same characteristics, rutting behavior, everything like that. Really, you just like the variation is the size of the animal, and then hence the size of the antler as you go north.
For sure. An Alaska Yukon moose does look pretty different from a Canadian. His body size is quite a bit larger. His antlers are quite a bit larger, but could they still interbreed just fine? I'm sure they could.
Are you in the market for serious boots for all feet, terrain and adventures? Well, look no further than Lower Boots. We have been running the Lower Ranger GTX3s for many, many years now without so much as a blister. The team at Lower have extended their generosity to you, our valued listeners, and supplied us with a unique discount code. Use code TWINELEMENTS10 at checkout for 10% off your next order. Wear Lowers on your next hunt. Your feet will thank you.
Cool. And so, looking then into like a bit of behavior, I guess, behind and characteristics about moose. So when's their rut predominantly? Because I imagine, like, I don't know, like the hunts that I've sort of seen for moose have either been calling rut hunts or sort of float plane hunts, or whether they go like a rafting hunt sort of thing like that. Maybe just describe sort of what opportunities and hunts there are for the moose.
Yeah, it's moose are very similar to elk as a rule of thumb. I will plan a moose hunt about the same as I would plan an elk hunt. So that mid-September through early October, mid-October, that's kind of your prime time for a moose rut. They're gonna be very, very similar. It's not uncommon to be in the woods. Like last year, I was in northern Utah hunting elk, and the moose rut was going on at the same time. So you could hear them the same time as the archery elk season. You could hear the moose calling to each other. So very, very similar to elk. They're not as tolerant for warm weather. An elk is fine coming out in the sun in September and chasing cows and being very active. A moose, he typically likes the thicker brush, the willows, the creek bottoms. He'll live in the mountains, but he wants to stay in the timber. He's covered in a black coat. He doesn't like the sun, doesn't like the heat. So a lot of moose hunts will get pushed even later than elk hunts, and moose hunts will become effective post-rut into late October, even into November. And what they're going for there is they want the leaves to fall off the tree. That's our fall season. And when the leaves start falling off the tree, maybe get a little snow on the ground, moose hunting can be more effective because you can see them, you can glass them. When they're not a cruising animal, they don't cover a lot of ground. A lot of times they'll live in one canyon. They don't like to be by other moose. They don't like to be, they're kind of solitary animals. So when the leaves come off the trees, it makes moose hunting a little bit easier.
And so do you often see just bulls in that case, like off by themselves in a creek bottom somewhere? And then like would you normally expect to see like a cow and just like is it a fawn? Is that what you call it? And then, or do you normally see like a couple of, like, you're going to see like, 3 or 4 cows and they're young together, or are they normally like even the cows are fairly solitary in their nature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So think of them just like elk. So it's a bull, a cow, and a calf. And typically there'll be a bull by himself. When he goes to rut, he'll go find a cow who's usually living by herself, and he'll court that cow until they breed just with her. He's not a herd animal. He won't bring in multiple cows. Typically he'll just breed the one cow, and then he'll leave once she's bred and go find a different cow. And that cow, she'll go off and live by herself. She'll have her calf by herself. She'll raise that calf by itself and then kick it off after a year or two. So they're very solitary, and they've been doing studies that show even when moose populations are too dense, like say 2 or 3 moose per square mile, that almost may be too high of a density, and they don't survive and they don't calf as well as they would if they were truly solitary animals. Like we've tried to grow more moose in Utah, Idaho. The only state that's doing really well in the lower 48 is Colorado. They've grown a lot of moose. They have really good habitat, but they're worried about overpopulation just because they're not a herd animal. They don't like being by other moose. It's kind of strange.
Do you see a moose running into a lot of agricultural problems like elk and stuff like that, where they go out into fields, or they more just stick into those creek bottoms and up in the thicker brush?
Yeah, not as many problems, but there's just not as many moose. We're talking Shira's moose, here in these western states, and it's rare to see a group of them that'll hit agriculture about anywhere. It's just not really a thing, and they're such a special animal. I mean, most people see a moose, that's a big deal. It's kind of like a sheep or a goat at that point. Like, whoa, we want to keep that animal alive. I've never seen landowners, complaining too much that there's too many moose. It's usually the elk and the deer and the antelope they complain about that, hit them by the dozens.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, yeah, do we want to start maybe just conscious that there is going to be so many facets and different angles to hit this from?
Yeah, I'll probably start just with the species, and we'll just knock those off. I mean, we talked about the 3, but if we talk Shira's moose opportunities, you've got to be in the states, from Washington to Colorado. And in order to get a tag there in any of those states, your only 2 options are to draw a tag, which means you got to get very, very lucky in the draw. You could apply in the drawing your entire life and never draw a Shiras moose tag for a bull or a cow. We have hunts for bulls and cows in most of these states. In order to not draw, if you just want to go hunt a Shiras moose, it becomes the most expensive moose to hunt because the auction tags or the conservation tags that you would have to buy to hunt that moose are very expensive. So you could be spending $40,000 US or more to hunt a Shiras moose in the States. So that's out of most people's price range. For a small moose, of course, right? Where you could go hunt other moose for a lot cheaper. But if you really want that species, you've got to just get lucky. Now, if you draw a tag, that's great because that's oftentimes very affordable, but only apply for moose in the states that you're already applying in. Like you're going to hunt deer and elk in Montana. I would spend the other $75, put your name in the hat for a moose tag. Maybe you get lucky, maybe you don't.
Yeah, that's sort of the tactic I guess I've taken in a lot of these states. I actually was applying in Vermont, New Hampshire, and I can't remember the third, but I've sort of stopped in recent years and just thought, well, for the $200 I am spending there, I'm probably just better off putting that into a piggy bank somewhere and then just, actually just buying a hunt in 20 or so years rather than, just keep on applying there with the raffle draw and stuff like that. With odds in these, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, all those, Colorado, is there any breakdown in terms of are we looking at a 0.1% chance or 1% chance, or what's the? I know I realize that it varies between the opportunity tag areas and the best in the best unit in the state where there's probably the biggest trophies or whatever. But what sort of what sort of percentages, just so people roughly understand?
Sure, I would say you are less than 1% chance forever for a bull moose tag in any of those states. So a fraction of a percent. If you're willing to hunt a cow moose, I've changed my approach in Colorado where I'm I'm willing to hunt cow moose just to say I've hunted Shiras moose. So I've changed my tactics to cow moose, but I'm still looking at a 10 or 15% chance for the next few years to draw a cow moose permit. So very, very difficult in any of the Shiras moose states.
And is it one of these things that, from my understanding, that it's one and done? If you draw one of these tags, are you able, just say you're lucky, just say, you're super lucky and you draw I draw a Colorado bull moose tag next year. If I go and secure, or even if I do shoot one or don't shoot one, am I able to go back in, 40 odd years when I draw it again potentially and go on another hunt, or no?
Yeah, every state's a little different. Colorado, for example, if you draw the tag and you go on the hunt, but you don't kill one, you're eligible to draw another one. So you would be back in the game. It's a once in a lifetime harvest in Colorado. But you contrast that to Utah. If you draw a Utah moose tag, it's a once in a lifetime tag. Whether you go or not, or kill or not, it's once in a lifetime. So a little bit different, but generally it's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Well, whether you get the tag or not, by the sounds of it, the draw odds, if you draw it in a lifetime, you're pretty lucky anyway. So
yeah,
the chance that lightning strikes twice and you get a tag, it depends how long. I hopefully plan on hunting into my 80s and 90s with the way that modern medicine's going at the moment. So you never know, you might be able to get a second tag in some of these states if you're super lucky. But even then, in 40 years, 50 years, how much competition is there going to be just to get an elk tag in some of these states, let alone
right,
with the way the population's going, let alone getting a moose tag. So we'll probably be hunting them virtually at that point, sitting in our jocks on the couch with some incredible,
right.
the way the technology's going. But no, perfect. So yeah, I guess Shiras moose, by the sounds of it, using the draw system is going to be, if you're applying already, it's worth the extra bit of money to have your name in the hat. But if you want to go on a moose hunt, by the sounds of it, you're probably better off saving your pennies and looking into what tag and outfitter opportunities there are elsewhere.
Yep. When you jump up to Canadian moose, right, that's probably the majority of the opportunities that are out there are Canadian moose. And like you mentioned, those 3 states in the Northeast, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, those have drawings where you don't have to hire an outfitter. So it's substantially cheaper, but you have to get very lucky. So Canada moose in those states in the U.S., you don't need a guide, pretty high success rates, but difficult draw odds as a non-resident of those states. I still apply for Maine personally, just because there's a few thousand moose permits there, and I would like to hunt a Canadian moose without having to pay a guide. So Maine's your best opportunity there to do that hunt, but I never plan on drawing that tag in my lifetime. Like there's no guarantees there at all. The rest of Canada, from east in Newfoundland all the way across to British Columbia, like that whole center portion of Canada, is full of Canadian moose. And that's the cheapest moose to hunt because, yes, you have to hire a guide. Everybody does that's a non-resident of Canada, has to hire a guide service to take them. But there's so many moose, and they're generally not that big compared to Alaska, so they're cheaper. Right. So we see Canadian moose hunts. We sell quite a few of those, and they can be anywhere from $8,000 to $15,000 US. That's kind of our range for Canadian moose hunts. And for a lot of hunters, they say, I want to do it once in my life. They save up for a few years. They buy that hunt and they go. You say, well, why do I need to go to Alaska? I hear a lot about Alaska moose. Yeah, they're bigger moose, but most people can't tell the difference between a 35-inch wide moose and a 55-inch moose. It's 20 inches different, but can you tell that much? Maybe not. So a lot of people just go to Canada and pay for that. And depending on the size of moose they're killing, that'll push you towards that upper end, but you can still get a reasonably priced moose hunt, for $10,000 to $12,000 for a Canadian.
So just to give people a bit of a guide, just because I'm actually looking into a moose hunt in Newfoundland for 2026 potentially, just about to start reaching out to some outfitters before this year's sort of hunting season rolls around, to start the conversation there. Obviously, being a bow hunter and stuff, they all seem to have really, really good success rates, in the sense of like most of them are boasting above 95% success rates, saying they take bow, but obviously mainly thinking that's probably a rifle hunt. But they reckon they see a lot of moose, which is obviously with the bow like the main thing, just getting opportunities. But yeah, everyone seems to be talking about that 40-inch mark for those Canadian moose. What is that sort of a typical, like what they call a trophy moose for the Canadian, what would be the sort of benchmark for the Shiras and the Yukon Alaskan moose as well?
Yeah, good question. I think for Shiras, it's typically closer to that 30-inch mark. Would be of the smaller variety. Anything over 30 inches is usually a pretty good moose. Like you said, Canadian, they're shooting for that 40-inch moose, would be a big one. And then Alaska, most guys are looking for a 55-inch or bigger in Alaska. So it goes up substantially there. But a 40-inch moose is a great trophy. I mean, just shipping that thing home, it arrives in a pretty big crate. I mean, it's a big trophy to have.
Oh, I know, and that's the thing. Like, I've always wanted to hunt a moose, and I know for me, looking at the price point, and the experience, to be honest, I feel like it. I don't know, probably talking about like what we were saying a couple of podcasts ago about those, hunting a deer where you've waited 25 years to draw the tag, and that pressure. As we'll probably get into the Yukon stuff, like having a tag that's, I don't know, upwards of, you hear, especially because of the conversion to Australian dollar, like you hear 40, 50 grand.
It's a lot.
US get thrown around, which is obviously, that's like 70, 80, 90 grand Australian. Like you're halfway into, it's a very solid house deposit, or, a new whole decked out ute or whatever, like there's a lot of money in that 7 to 10 day hunt. Whereas the 8 to 15 grand, for the experience to go and hunt a Canadian moose sounds a bit more, friendly to the bank statement, but also just, I don't know, a bit less pressure with very similar sort of experience if you're not chasing that, it needs to be 50 or 60 or 70 or whatever inches. So
it's fun to hunt moose no matter how big it is. I mean, I love hunting moose, and I've only got to do it a few times for myself, but just seeing that big, tall creature come in, black body, swaying his antlers, it doesn't matter if he's 30 inches or 50. Honestly, it's more about the terrain where you got to go, what country you got to see, what other things you got to do, and how much work it is, right? A Canadian moose or Newfoundland where you shoot it, you drag it to a road, they help you get it out. Like that's pretty cush. That's a good hunt. Most of the time, Alaska hunts, you hear horror stories of days and days of packing moose meat through a swamp, and you're like, that does not sound that fun, but I kind of want that opportunity for myself.
Atlas Wild helps to fuel your outdoor adventures. My personal favourite is the peach iced tea in the Rise, which is caffeinated and keeps you ultra focused while on the mountain. The electrolytes and B vitamins in there prevent muscle soreness and means that you can back it up on these extended hunts day after day. We've teamed up with Atlas Wild to get 10% off your next order by using code TWIN10, that is TWIN, 10 the number, to get 10% off your next order. Head to their website and shop today.
Is it pretty with the Canadian moose? Is that very much so that it's like, okay, we've got this population of moose. You're, Austin, you're a recognized and registered outfitter in Canada. We're going to give you 15 moose tags for you to sell on to, desirable clients. Or how does that all work? Like, so you're buying the hunt and the tag, I'm assuming, for these Canadian hunts?
Yeah, so outfitters in Canada will receive a quota. They'll own an area where they have rights on public or private land to hunt, and they'll receive a quota of, say, hey, you can take 20 moose a year, sell as many hunts as you would like. You can take 20, that's your quota. So they're limited in number, and that's how they sell them. A lot of Canadian hunts will do combination hunts or multiple species. So oftentimes you can hunt bear and moose together, or bear and caribou and moose as an add-on or a trophy fee. So there may be some opportunities there depending on which is your primary species, what you want to hunt first and what you'd be willing to add on.
Yeah. And most of these hunts are sort of 7 to 10 day hunts, I'm assuming.
Most of them, the Canadian moose hunts can be a little shorter, just because they're high success. It's logistics that get expensive. If you're dealing with horses or little plane flights into remote country of Canada, then it can definitely become a longer hunt. But typically, if you've got access to a vehicle or a road, the hunt can be pretty short. Because the further north you go, the more weather you have to deal with, bad weather.
And are you recommending, like, obviously there's a combination of bow and rifle guys and gals listening to this podcast, like, would you recommend doing as close as you can to the rut hunt, or are you chasing them later when the bulls are just solitary and sort of sitting on feed somewhere and the leaves are falling off? Or what's, there's obviously different hunt styles and tactics. Maybe even talk to like mobility sort of thing. Like if it's a rut hunt, and you're maybe an older gentleman or lady and you can't cover the country or, it's easier to cover the country when they're rutting and calling them to you as opposed to bashing your way through willow flats and stuff like that later on. Or, you're up on a glassing knob and then you've got to sprint a mile to go down and try and find them before they go into the dense, thick, dark timber. Sort of maybe speak to that a little bit more.
I mean, most people I run into either want to hunt the rut and they're set on that. They've heard moose won't bugle or do anything really loud, but they grunt and they call to the cows, and the cows respond because they're so solitary. Their calls can go a long ways across the terrain, and so it's very exciting to see a moose, come a mile or two to your call. That's not uncommon. So that a lot of people either want to hunt the rut or if they're really concerned about meat, right? Because a moose is a big animal and they want to bring the meat home, which if you live in the States, you can bring the meat home easily from Canada. So then a lot of people will hunt later in the season when it's colder so they can get their meat home easier and make sure they, don't risk spoiling the meat before they get it home.
Yeah, cool. Is there any other notes that you want to add in about Canadian moose? I guess with outfitters, I'm sure there's hundreds of different outfitters, across. I might even pick your brain outside this podcast about some potentially in Canada as well, just to deepen my search. But yeah, I'm sure it's probably one of these things that it's better off just talking to one of your hunt advisors to get a bit more information and help when it comes to actually booking an outfitter, or if people want to do the research for themselves. But I mean, the resource is there with Huntin Fool, so I'd probably suggest jumping in to that and try and get some help.
Yeah, generally we'll ask people their budget, their expectations, hunting style. Do you want to hunt from a truck? Are you willing to ride horses? Which weapon do you want to hunt with? We can narrow it down pretty quick to all the hunts we have available, like on our website, that are available to be booked right now with outfitters. We kind of go through some of those preliminary questions and we can narrow it down to, here's the 2 or 3 hunts that would fit the bill for you. Here's their availability, and start planning. And it's definitely, you can start planning 2-3 years out. I mean, outfitters will book out a couple of years for moose hunts. So there's no reason to not start planning early.
No, that's it. And I guess, if someone wants to go in and chase that, that incredible Yukon moose that takes up a whole wall in the living room, like yourself, or whole wall in the shed, what's the go with that? I'm assuming you're saving up for most guys and girls, you're saving up for a few years for a sort of hunt like that.
You just got to save up. I mean, it's usually guys will call, they'll shop around, see what their budget needs to be, and then they'll say, can I put $2,000 or $3,000 down on a hunt to hold my spot with a plan to pay off the rest? Most outfitters are willing to work on that, but sometimes it might be better just put it in a savings account, stash it away, buy some Bitcoin, and then cash it out here in a couple of years and go.
Mate, if you bought Bitcoin 5 years ago, you'd be going on quite a few Yukon moose hunts in your lifetime, I reckon.
Yeah.
I've missed the boat there, but
we'd all be on moose hunts. Yeah.
Feel like Oprah Winfrey. You get a moose hunt. You get a moose hunt. You get a moose hunt. That's true, and that's sort of why I guess I've pulled out of, like, I was applying in a fair few more states, but it's one of these things that I've realized that it's easier to just, especially like Maine and all those type of things where they're all raffle draws and stuff. My odds are pretty low, and it's like I had to buy the state permit then buy the raffles, and I was like, hey, I'm actually better off here just for once, actually just saving my money and going and spending it when the time's right. But what's for most of these outfitters up in Alaska, because I imagine that far remote sort of experience, there's not as many opportunities, or different outfitters compared to maybe Canada, where there's a lot more opportunity there. What are you sort of looking at for a moose hunt there? And because the minimum requirement to shoot one is a lot higher too. Like a legal bull's 4, and I know it probably varies a bit, but it's like 4 brow tine points, or however you call it, and like a 55 or 50-inch bull in a lot of these spots. Is that correct?
Yeah, it depends on the unit. Alaska it varies depending on where you're at. So some units are any bull. You can shoot any moose, any bull moose you see. Some units usually have a 50-inch minimum, so it's got to be 50 inches wide outside, or a minimum brow tines on one side. Maybe it's a 3 brow tine unit or a 4 brow tine unit, which if they have that many tines on their front palm, then they're legal no matter how wide they are. So it just depends on where you're at. But basics in Alaska is, you've probably seen a whole bunch of movies, videos that say, come to Alaska, hunt moose over the counter, just buy the tag and go. And that's true as far as the tag. You do not have to draw. All moose hunts in Alaska are over the counter. Tags are $800, right? And it sounds, oh, that's so great. But then it's the only state where we don't allow non-citizens or non-resident aliens to hunt unless they have a guide, right? So you can come up from South Pacific and hunt in any state and you're treated the same as anybody else except in Alaska. You have to have a guide with you for all species: black bear, deer, moose, caribou, everything.
Let's break that down a little bit more, because people aren't going to understand probably the nomenclature there a little bit. So there's residents, which are people who live in Alaska, and then there's non-residents, who are people from Canada and the lower 40. So pretty much anyone from the US. So they're classified as non-residents within Alaska, and they can go and buy an OTC moose tag for $800 and then go and hunt a moose in Alaska. What I sadly found out, because I thought I was in that boat, is then there's this other special, which we like to call ourselves special, group of people that they call non-resident aliens. So those non-resident aliens are then another class of people, which is like, people from Asia, Europe, pretty much anyone that's not from Canada and the US, and they can't go and hunt in Alaska with any species, like what Austin just said, without having an outfitter. So yes, you can just buy a tag, but then the cost of that hunt then becomes the fact that you need to pay an excessive amount of money for an outfitter to go and hunt with them, because otherwise it would be quite a relatively cheap hunt. Really, it just becomes a trip of logistics. You're probably looking at, like, a lot of these OTC units, from my understanding, are quite hard to actually get into where the moose are and stuff like that. And you're looking at horses or float planes or those type of fun things that build to the trip. For most people, that's like sort of why you're doing it. You're doing these remote wilderness trips. So that's not a discouraging factor. It's an exciting factor, but it just means that it's more than just like buying a Colorado elk tag and just walking out into the hills. It's something you're organizing in advance.
Yeah, it's in, we've said, well, why does Alaska do that? Why are they discriminating against hunters from other countries? And the main reason is Canada. Right, Alaska borders Canada, and if Alaska allowed Canadian citizens to come over and to hunt without a guide, they would hunt a lot, right? And so they said, no, we're going to shut that down to Canadian citizens. They must hire an outfitter, and kind of put the kibosh on all Canadians coming over to Alaska to hunt. And vice versa, Alaskans can't go to Canada and hunt without an outfitter. So they're not upset at you guys. They're not discriminating against the rest of the world coming to hunt. It's just to push Canada out. So a Canadian citizen cannot hunt in Alaska. They're considered a non-resident alien, and they must have a guide as well, pay higher fees, all that.
Yeah, right. So Canada, non-resident aliens, but all of the US is just a non-resident, and they can go and hunt OTC but without a guide. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Dogs. The outrage.
Yep. You can be in Florida. And be, 1,000 miles from Alaska, and you can go hunt there without a guide. But if you live in Canada by 1 mile, you can't drive across the border to Alaska and hunt, because you're not a member of that country. Canadians are not U.S. citizens.
Yeah, wow. That's crazy. You'd be better off. I don't know. It depends. I've always thought about like the whole, maybe in my earlier 20s, I should have moved to Alaska or something and lived there, and then that way I would have been given like sheep tags, and for how much they cost, I could have just worked in a coffee shop and made money essentially on what it's going to cost me to hunt these tags in the future. But yeah, no, just didn't have it in me. My life probably would have gone differently if I did.
Yeah.
Now I need to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, so it's probably not worth talking about all the unguided opportunities for moose. That's usually what I talk about to United States citizens, is the unguided moose opportunities that you can do for $7,000 to $10,000, and that's to pay for your airplane charters or boat rentals, and you can go hunt moose on an over-the-counter tag. But when I'm talking to non-resident aliens, people from other countries, that doesn't really apply, and we have to just play the guided route. And guided moose hunts there, depending on your accommodations, if you're in a boat, if you're in a cabin, or if you're in a tent, and how you're hunting, it can range from 25,000 at the lower end all the way up to 50,000 at the higher end, which that's what's 50,000, probably 90,000 Australian. That's a pretty expensive hunt to go shoot a moose.
Cayuga broadheads are engineered for success and built by experience. These are the broadheads we trust for all of our bow hunts. Whether it's buffalo and bangtang bulls in Australia's Northern Territory or chital deer along the basalt wall, we have ultimate confidence in their range. I'm currently loving the 150 grain Zots. Regardless of your preferred broadhead, quality and performance is guaranteed across the range. If you would like to try them today or shoot them already and want to restock, head to their website and use code TWIN10, that's TWIN 10 numerically at checkout for 10% off your next order. You will not be disappointed.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I've actually explored and spoken to some people about it, and that's where I've sort of landed in the Newfoundland sort of Canadian moose area, just for just say spending 10 grand US, you're sort of spending probably 16, 17 grand Australian, which is, it's still a big hunt, but it, in terms of a hunt that I've always wanted to do and stuff like that, it's a lot more palatable saving up, 15 to 18 grand than saving up 80 to 90 grand. I'd have to start selling photos of my feet to be able to accomplish something like that. I guess, what other opportunities lie in, we spoke briefly about Russia in the introduction there, and you said obviously with the climate being a war zone at the moment, there's some opportunities there, and they're similar to the, I won't be able to pronounce it, so I'll leave that up to you, but they're similar to the Alaskan and Yukon moose for these pretty big moose. What sort of price tag and opportunities are you looking at there? Is there many outfitters, and how, I guess when I hear Russia, sort of the hairs on the back of your neck do sort of stand up a bit. Is there some safety logistical stuff, there? Like, do you hear of many hunts where people go and then all their hunting gear gets lost and there's no outfitter waiting at the airport for them, or is it all pretty? I imagine there wouldn't be too many guys doing it, and they'd obviously need to have, they'd have pretty good reputations, the guys that are. Like, what's the sort of climate over there at the moment?
Yeah, most people in Russia, you pay about half as much as what you would pay in Alaska for the same size of moose. Now, of course, you're going to have more logistics, more in your flights and getting your animals shipped home, but when all's said and done, it'll be about half the price to go to Russia. And you can kill some really big moose there. It's just it depends on your risk tolerance, how much you're willing to fly to Russia, because you have to fly to Moscow. There's no way to get to Eastern Russia. You have to fly to Moscow, which is way in the west by Europe, and then fly all the way across the country to the east. You end up really close to Alaska, but you can't fly from Alaska direct to where you're hunting. Not anymore. So most of their hunts they do late season, like November in the snow. They use helicopters a lot. They use snowmobiles quite a bit on the snow, and they kill some great moose. But it's those that want to chance at shooting a really big one, or they need a Russian moose, or they just want to save a bunch of money and avoid Alaska or the Yukon in Canada and go over there. But we still book hunts all the time. We sell hunts over there in Russia. We arrange everything. I've never heard of anybody having a problem, honestly. Even before the war, during the war, obviously there's not as many people going now, but Eastern Russia is so far away from Western Russia and Ukraine. It's like a whole different world over there. And it's kind of sad for those communities to lose all this hunting, all the hunters coming in for tourism dollars, to keep the hunting businesses going, because it's sad when we don't go there. They rely on this in Eastern Russia, and now very few people are going. So hopefully the war will end soon, and we can push more hunters to Russia for bear and moose, because they have phenomenal hunting.
Yeah, cool. Sounds like we need to go over and support Russia and go and shoot some big moose.
Hey, I'm in. I want to go. I don't know if my wife is super excited about me going, but
I might just tell mine that I'm going to Alaska and just leave it at that. I'll be away for a while, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. Until the location loads up on Snapchat or Instagram or something like that, and we've checked into Moscow.
yeah, that might not go over too well. But yeah, overall moose populations are doing pretty good. They ebb and flow like anything else, but it's more demand than anything. Demand is driving up and supply's about the same. So that's what's driven costs up so much across the board.
And I guess it was before we sort of shift pace and jump into the caribou. Is there any other opportunities in any parts of the world where hunters can go and chase a moose, or have we spoken about the sort of the main ones?
Yeah, I mean, we probably won't go down the rabbit hole of all these other moose subspecies, right? Asia is a very interesting place. You start getting into Mongolia and all these strange countries that have elk. They have variants of elk, variants of sheep, variants of moose. But for most hunters, unless you're a species collector, you're not going to go to those places. Russia's kind of the only outlier because it still is a lot cheaper and they provide a good quality hunt for moose and bear. But outside of that, there's not too many that we need to talk about here.
Well, let's jump into caribou then. Actually, can we hear about your moose hunt first, quickly?
My moose hunt.
The big ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I took my first moose that I killed for myself. I've helped people on moose hunts, but my first moose I killed for myself last season, 2 seasons ago in Alaska, and that was a do-it-yourself, unguided. But we had to rent a boat from an individual, so we flew into a little lake, rented a boat, got fuel from him, and then we were on our own. And it was a little flat-bottom boat, and we motored up a river, almost 100 miles up this tiny little river that sometimes was only a few inches deep, and we had to push the boat. I mean, moose hunts are just work more than anything. But we motored up, my father and I and a good friend, and we motored up and just watched the riverbanks. It was so flat. We had hoped we could glass, but it was just too flat, too many trees. You couldn't glass at all. So we had to rely on our horrible calling skills to try to call these moose in. And moose hunting requires a lot of patience, and I don't have a lot of patience. I'm more of a run and gun type hunter, if you will. I like to see something and go after it. But we decided to just call and try to be patient. And sometimes if a moose hears you a mile away, he's not going to come running in. He'll just decide, oh, maybe tomorrow or the next day I'll come to that cow call. Well, I definitely don't have the patience for that. So we would call and then we would move on, move up the river. And I'm sure the moose came in after we were gone. But eventually we kind of ran into a spot where my dad was calling by the main river. I snuck through the trees and I just heard a faint, like, bull moose call. And it's kind of like a grunt almost under their breath. And I thought, whoa, that moose is closer than I thought. I wonder if I can get eyes on him, because they won't come all the way into a call. They'll kind of hold up and call back to the cow. So I snuck in and found this moose. And he was only 75 yards away. I left my bow at the boat. I just had my rifle with me because it's bear country, and I just jumped out of the boat to see what I could hear. So rookie mistake. I didn't have my bow, but it was a big bull. So I thought I'm just going to shoot it with my rifle. He was standing in the water, which you should never shoot a moose standing in the water, because their standing is more like our swimming as far as depth. So I shoot this moose in the water thinking, oh, he'll run out of the water. Well, he turns to run and basically dies in the middle of this lake. And luckily, moose float. So once they bloat up a little bit, they float. And we were able to swim this moose over to the shore until he hit bottom. And then it took us a few hours to use ropes and pulleys and stakes to try to drag him into shallower water. He ended up in about 2 feet of water where we ended up cutting him up at. And there's no way to move a moose. You can't drag him, you can't flip him, nothing. So we cut him up, in our waders, basically underwater, and you have to take every scrap bit of meat. In Alaska, you can't remove the meat from the bones, so you have to leave the ribs intact, the hindquarters, front shoulders, all have to be bone in. So it was a lot of work. It turns into a day or multi-day event. But in the end, I got him out, and I wished I had not shot him in the lake.
That's epic. That sounds so, yeah, wow. That's how far. So how far was the shot? 75 yards then, or was it a bit closer?
Yeah. It was 75 yards.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. And, yeah, wow. Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, the idea of butchering something in the water, I mean, like, you've got no options by the sounds of it, but that just sounds for contamination control is, I mean, I guess you're talking about probably glacial melt here where it's only, 5 degrees of beautiful, running stream, I guess, is a bit different from a big marshy swamp.
I wish it was more like a beaver pond full of mud and beaver poop. I mean, it was not ideal.
Yeah, right. How do they? So they obviously eat pretty well, I imagine.
Oh, very, very good. Yeah, we ate some backstrap that night, made some tacos, and I still have a couple of pieces in my freezer. We've been slowly eating it. It's very good meat, very mild taste, and there's a lot of it. I donated some of it to the local village there. Just it doesn't make sense to bring it all home cost-wise, but I brought home as much as I could and left the rest with some families there.
Yeah, perfect. And I imagine they would have really appreciated that. I imagine that's the thing too. Like, just when someone gets a moose, it's like a logistical, like, righto, all hands on deck here. Like, that's how much would a moose quarter weigh? Are we talking like sort of 100 pounds, 150 pounds per quarter, or how much would you say?
Yeah, those hindquarters are probably about that 130, 140 pound mark, somewhere in there. The hindquarters and the front shoulders aren't too bad. It's everything else that just adds on, right? Because the quarters, that's 4 backpack loads, but then each of the rib sides are so large and sharp. That's another backpack load. And then the neck meat, the brisket, the hide, like, it just adds on. There's so much other meat that you forget about on smaller animals because you just throw it in the bag. But on these bigger animals, it becomes an entire load by itself. So it's usually about 14 different backpack loads to get one moose out.
Well, that's the thing. I imagine even like most of the time you're wanting to taxidermy, that moose, like just the hide itself would be insanely heavy. And then plus you add in the skull, like there's 2 loads almost there just in that. And then, like you said, like, especially if you've got to keep the rib meat on the bone, like, you're carrying so much more bone than you are meat for these portions of. With the neck meat, can you take the neck meat off the neck, or do you have to carry like that whole slab of a bull's neck out?
Yes. No. Yeah, just the ribs and the quarters have to stay on the bone. Everything else you can take off the bone. But yeah, just that neck is over 100 pounds, for both sides of the neck. That's a lot.
Yeah, and I imagine that's the thing, because there's no structure to it. It's just this big lump of sack of meat, really, that's got no structure or whatever. At least an elk quarter, a moose quarter, or same with an elk quarter. Like, it's got that sort of vertical sort of structure to it. You put it nicely next, in your load frame of your backpack, and it sits perfectly, and it's not too bad. You get brush snapping above you and stuff. But yeah, I've found carrying out like just sometimes the worst pack outs I've only experienced elk. Like when you're carrying out the cape, or you're carrying out like just all the scrap, like the maybe the backstrap and tenderloins and the neck meat in a bag, and it's just this big. Even then it's only probably, 50, 60 pounds of just crap, really. Like, lovely cuts, but it's just, there's no structure. So it's just, it's just sort of hard.
It's really hard. Yeah, it's hard with moose because I hunted in late September during the rut, and it's difficult to keep everything cool, right? To cool off that big of a mass of meat is difficult, even especially on the bone. When you've got all that bone heat, it can bone sour very easy if you're not careful. So it's very difficult to keep it cool and get it processed in time before it starts spoiling.
And was there any threat of bear in the country? Like, I imagine there would have been pretty high bear densities. Was there any encounters there, or like sort of scary moments with that, or was it all pretty good? I mean, having 3 of you there.
Luckily not on this moose hunt. We didn't have any problems with bears. There's a lot of grizzlies in the area. But you have to realize in the fall season, the bears are very focused on either salmon, fish if they have them, or berries on the mountains. So we didn't have any problems with bears where we were at, which was nice.
Oh, cool.
Need a caffeine hit? We've got you covered. Power your passions with OzCaff Energy. Designed to be convenient, discreet and portable. These small caffeine pouches pack a punch and will get you out of those lows in no time. Place one of the pouches under your top lip for rapid absorption, which will have you performing your best in no time. With added benefits of 0 calories and 0 sugar, there's nothing to lose. Use code TWINELEMENTS for 10% off your next order.
Well, hopefully after hearing all your advice on moose hunts, some of our listeners can go and experience some pretty similar emotions and logistical nightmares trying to get their bull out in the future. But we might shift gears and jump into the caribou section of this podcast now, and just get a bit of insight on them. I realise similarly to the moose, I think there is 6 species, if I'm not, you might correct me there, but of caribou that are recognised around the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, most of the time they just recognize 5. You have some subspecies that some make the argument to go deeper, but there's 5 generally for like the super slam or the caribou slam. There's just the 5 they recognize currently. The problem with one of the 5 is it's no longer huntable, and that's the Quebec Labrador caribou. And it's an interesting one because that hunt was so affordable just a few years ago that most of us hunters said, we'll do it later. It's cheap. It's easy. I can go to Canada and shoot a caribou, oftentimes 2 caribou on the same hunt. And so many of us hunters didn't do it because it was so cheap. It seemed too easy. And now that hunt is completely shut down, where you are not allowed to hunt those Quebec caribou at all. So it's pretty sad to see that happen, and so most of us waited too long.
And what happened there? Was that a disease, I'm assuming, event? I'm assuming winter kill wouldn't have just wiped out a whole population like that.
It was, try not to get too political here, but most caribou hunting is based around politics, and it's based around local indigenous people and how they want to manage or who they want to hunt in their areas. So, and that's true from Alaska all the way through Canada. Caribou live in some remote country that's uninhabited, and caribou are seen as a subsistence animal or providing food for the local tribes, local people. So the first people to lose the opportunity to hunt them for sport is non-residents. So Quebec caribou was open for forever for hunters, and then in 2018, the tribes petitioned the government to shut it down, and all recreational hunting was lost. They said, we're shutting it down with no intention to start it up again. There's still subsistence hunting. Locals can hunt for meat, but it had nothing to do with numbers of caribou or disease. It was just blamed on too many non-resident hunters making this too difficult to subsist off the caribou, so they shut it down. And that was in Canada. They have different management practices, but we see similar events happen in Alaska as well.
Yeah, well, hopefully with a couple of centuries, maybe not centuries, but decades of good years, and the numbers become ridiculous where they're sitting on their front porch and there's caribou walking past, they might reverse their bill to close it down, because it's not so much counting and stacking up the species, but I mean there's a pretty cool opportunity by the sounds of it, and a lot of that that I'd call like native or indigenous hunts. Like I mean that's got a whole cultural aspect in a hunt, or like in the hunt for itself. You know what I mean? Like he's experiencing what these tribes go through on a regular basis, and just seeing the villages and hunting with some incredible hunters, whether it be in Africa or even here in Australia or all the way through the US and up into Alaska and Canada and stuff like that. Mongolia, like there's that culture of hunting everywhere in the world is very strong in these indigenous communities, and it'd be cool to see it open up again. But obviously, it's politics and hunting don't always meet eye to eye.
It's really easy to close down a hunt and to come up with a reason to do away with a hunt, but man, it is very difficult to ever bring that hunt back. And that's why it is important to fight for your hunting rights, because it's really hard to talk people into getting it back, because then it becomes a social issue and it doesn't feel right, and they don't care about the economics. They just don't want it once it's gone. So I don't know that we'll ever see Quebec come back. I'm hopeful, but that eastern part of Canada is a whole different world. It's not managed like the western portion of Canada, so it's difficult.
Yeah. No, cool. And let's go into some happier notes. What are the other species? Let's talk about hunting.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of discouraging. But most people that look at the caribou from east to west, Quebec's out. You have woodland caribou and central Canadian barren ground caribou. Most of those two species you're never going to hunt. Most people don't care about those caribou until they've killed one of the first two. So the primary caribou species is the barren ground caribou, which is all of Alaska and the Yukon Northwest Territories. And then the mountain caribou, which is a little further south in Canada. So that's British Columbia and southern Yukon. That's the mountain caribou, and then the barren ground. The other two I mentioned, the woodland, which is all the way to the east, and the central Canadian. You don't hunt those unless you already have the other two, and you need to add two more. It's the species chasers, right? The collectors.
Is it mainly due to price, or is it mainly due to size that the barren, for example, are bigger than the woodland? Is that sort of why are they chasing? Why are they going to hunt those two first rather than going for a woodland caribou, for example?
It's both. The woodland caribou and the central Canadian caribou are the smallest, and they're the most expensive. So you can be $30,000 to hunt those two species each, and they're just a smaller caribou. So most people say, well, I want to go hunt the bigger caribou that are cheaper first and just get a caribou under my belt for a reasonable price. And then if you decide you want all four species to collect them all, then you would go chase those other two. But nobody ever starts with those two, in my experience.
Yeah, cool. And so I guess what sort of hunts and like it's probably typical to the moose hunt, where the easier hunts and doing it out of a lodge, for example, are going to fetch a lot higher price than going by a snow machine or something like that, or horses, or I don't know, float plane. How because a lot of them you're hunting along a migration corridor, from my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's not as common as it used to be. Back in the Quebec Labrador days, it was always migration, right? I grew up watching those hunting videos of thousands of caribou walking by you, and you were right in the middle of the migration. But that doesn't happen near as much with barren ground caribou like in Alaska. That's always the hope that you can get in front of a migration herd, but most outfitted hunts, most guides and outfitters, they know where the caribou are and they'll just target that. Most of us don't have enough time to follow a migration or patience, if you will. So most of the time we just buy a hunt. They take you into an area, they glass, they spot and stalk, and you find one that you like. So barren ground caribou hunting, like I said, is the cheapest. Most of your guided hunts in Alaska are about $15,000 for those. You can super high success rates, any weapon you want. They're not hard to hunt with a bow. Typically you can get closer, but just comes down to accommodations and trophy potential.
Yeah. Cool. And what, with availabilities, is it something that sort of like a moose hunt, you're sort of maybe thinking about a couple of years in advance, or if there's people listening that go, 2026 seems like a good year to go and chase a caribou, is availability still pretty good? Like, is it as competitive? Because they're beautiful animals. Like they look fascinating. Is there that love and sort of growing, less opportunity, I guess, with caribou of late, or is it still a hunt that's fairly accessible? Obviously, 15 grand, it's got a bit of a price tag on it, but is it something that people can sort out and outfitter quite easily after, maybe talking to you guys and getting a bit of guidance on what style of hunt and what type of weapon and when they'd want to go and so on and so forth?
It's getting more difficult. Overall, caribou populations are trending down. And that's all caribou species. So if you look at the last 20 years or 30 years, caribou hunting opportunities have gone down drastically. When moose hunts are about the same, prices have gone up because demand has gone up. But caribou hunting, the prices are going up because demand's up and supply is way down. So we're seeing huge numbers of caribou. Just they're trying to figure out, is it disease? Is it predation? I mean, we used to have a herd in southwestern Alaska called the Mulchatna herd that was 500,000 caribou. And now today, 20 years later, there's none, right? They're just gone and they have no idea why. It wasn't overhunting. It wasn't a specific disease event. It's very difficult to understand caribou herds. They're kind of deciding they just go up and down, right? Lots of studies are being done that populations just ebb and flow. They increase and they go down. And so we just kind of have to react with that. So if someone's planning on hunting a caribou, they probably need to do it sooner than later. We tell everybody that. I would plan a trip. If caribou's on your list, they're not going to get any cheaper. And we're probably going to lose more opportunities next year than we had this year. So can you plan a spot 2 years out? Yes. We can still get you a spot, but caribou needs to be done sooner than later. I went and shot my first caribou for myself last year. I just knew I need to get this done, get it on the list before it could shut down.
Yeah, wow. That's scary almost to think that there was a population of 500,000 caribou that just disappeared in 20 years. Like, you think, that's and to have no real, like, some emerging disease, I don't know, like some pneumonia or something like that, or what's the prion disease that's going on in deer at the moment across the lower 48?
Chronic wasting disease.
Chronic waste, like something like that. Like it's crazy to think that there's no like, we reintroduce wolves back into this area, and the caribou hadn't seen a wolf in 30 years, and obviously that had huge effects on calf success rates and so on, or there was a hard winter or whatever, like it's just crazy to think, just sort of after 20 years 500,000 caribou just dwindled away to nothing. Like, yeah, Noah's Ark, man. Someone should have taken 4 and put them in a box somewhere.
It's very, yeah. This is very interesting. They've been trying really hard to get that herd back just the last couple of years. I mean, basically we're down to nothing. Now they're up to a couple thousand, and the only way they've been able to do that is just going in and they're shooting from helicopters all the bears and wolves that they can find, just really trying to keep the calves alive so that the herd can grow back. But man, how long does it take to grow hundreds of thousands of caribou? That's going to take a while. I don't know if we'll ever see it in our lifetimes. Yeah.
And that's crazy, because like as a management, shooting wolves and bears in that area, like, is it something where you could encourage hunters to go in and give out these like predation tags where it's like, hey, no, we really want you to go and control all the bears in this area, like, please?
Well, they do. I mean, a lot of those areas you can shoot 2 grizzly bears every year. You can hunt them same day from from an airplane. the problem is logistics. So much of Alaska is so expensive to get out there and hunt that even a resident that lives in Alaska just doesn't have thousands of dollars for fuel and time to go fly out there to shoot 2 bears that they can't eat. It's just not practical. And, we're not going to get into bounty programs or paying people to shoot them, even though that's probably what would help the most.
Is because something like interestingly enough, actually might look into getting a black bear tag in Montana, just an over-the-counter tag. It's a bit of a side note for if we have time and stuff. And I've actually it's not from always wanted to shoot a bear, have a skull on the wall, have the claws coming out of the rug on the floor, blah blah blah, all that stuff. I probably couldn't care if someone said to me, "Hey, you can't have the rug and the skull and stuff." It's actually just purely from I want to eat it point of view. I actually really want to try it, and obviously try not to get trichinosis from it as well, which would be nice. But yeah, so people don't really eat grizzly or brown bear, however you want to call it.
No, they do not. It's there's some tribes, there's some local villages that would eat them, but it is not preferred. They carry a lot more parasites and blood diseases than say like a black bear. You just think about what a brown bear eats. It's typically not accepted to eat it. I personally wouldn't eat it. It's kind of gross, honestly. You can eat it, right? There's a lot of old timers that ate polar bear and brown bear. They did fine, but it's not ideal.
Yeah. And so is there harvest laws with brown bear then? Is there you need to take the meat, or is it you didn't just do it for more of a trophy hunt?
Yep. You think of it as a predation hunt. You're curbing the predator population. You don't have to take coyote meat or wolf meat, and you don't take brown bear or grizzly bear meat, and it's not required. You have to take the skull and the hide only.
Know where you stand with onX, the most accurate GPS mapping tech for outdoor enthusiasts, trusted by millions of hunters worldwide. We utilize onX whilst hunting in the US. Its mapping systems, specialist drop pins, tracking features, topographical maps, and accuracy is unmatched. Being able to plan and prepare for our hunts overseas in the comfort of our own home is a game changer. If you're looking at hunting in the US, Canada, or Alaska, then onX is a must.
And just jumping back into the caribou then, there's no caribou in the lower 48, is that correct?
Yeah, there were a few that were in northern Idaho. They were trying to keep alive right on the Canada border. But last I heard, they were really to keep those alive, and they may have lost them all. I mean, it was a handful, less than 10. So, yeah, it's fair to say there are no caribou in the lower 48. Definitely no huntable caribou. The only other opportunity that's worth mentioning would be a reindeer hunt, and that's where caribou, as they came over from your northern territories in England or in Europe and your Greenland, they started domesticating caribou, and they came up with the reindeer variety, which is just a smaller, shorter, stockier version of a caribou. A reindeer is a domesticated caribou, basically. And there still are free-ranging, huntable reindeer operations. Typically, you can get them a little cheaper. There's some islands in Alaska that have reindeer. Oftentimes, you're buying the hunt from the local tribe or the village that owns the island, and you can hunt reindeer. We offer, for example, a hunt on an island in Alaska where the reindeer herd is free-ranging on the whole island. Once a year, they will bring in a certain amount of animals. They will cull them out of the herd and sell the meat or sell the velvet. But other than that, they're an unmanaged herd. And you can do that cheaper than a caribou hunt for sure. But at that point, you're buying rights to shoot a non-wild animal that lives in free-ranging conditions, but it's a non-wild animal, and that's a reindeer. They can have just as big of antlers. They can have some crazy antlers sometimes, but that's become more popular just as caribou hunting opportunities get more slim.
And what sort of price tag are we looking at? Availability sounds pretty easy by the sounds of that with the sort of unmanaged population, but what sort of price tag are you sort of looking at for one of them?
Typically cheaper than the barren ground, so anywhere from 11,000 to 15,000 for a reindeer hunt is pretty typical. And success is, of course, high. The meat's excellent, but it's not a wild caribou as managed by the state. It's just it's not domesticated either. It's not like you're showing up to a high fence, shooting an animal. It's just a managed, owned, privately held animal.
Yeah, so essentially the tribe, like these reindeer are trapped on an island and the tribe have the rights to them, so you're just paying the tribe. It's like on a Texas, really. Like it's, except the high fence is the island border.
Yeah,
but,
very similar.
You know, they're very much still wild by definition. They're just not managed by Fish and Wildlife Agency or whatever. They're just managed by a tribe. So no, it's cool, especially if they get as big. I mean, saving some money there might be an option for people to look at, and you know, it sounds like it could be a pretty cool hunt. Might be able to chuck in some bird hunting or some some fishing or something like that as well. Because so when you see like Greenland and Iceland and those sort of hunts, is that mainly that'd be the reindeer species rather than caribou? Is that?
Yeah, that's pretty fair. There's portions of Greenland where they've reintroduced central Canadian barren ground caribou. So you might not know exactly what you're getting. You can book a Canadian caribou hunt in Greenland. You can book a reindeer hunt in Greenland. There's definitely a gray area in the caribou world, as you can tell, especially in these places where they've moved them or they were extirpated and then they brought them back. And yeah, it gets a little messy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like they eliminate that, or not, they don't eliminate, but you know, a whole mob or group or herd of caribou disappear, and then they reintroduce them from stocks from somewhere else. I mean, does it become that new one, or is it it's the location of where the herd is that defines the species of what it is? You know, like, because then by that definition, really they're all the same. So you're just ticking off an experience of a caribou hunt in a new location rather than off like, you know, brown bear, black bear.
Hey, I say this about hunting all the time, James. Nobody really cares. Who cares, right? Like, to each his own. Whatever you want to hunt, the way you want to hunt it, more power to you. If you want to go shoot a caribou that's maybe a reindeer, who cares? Like, if it's what you want to do, go do it. That's what I say.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and we see this a little bit.
That's my quote of the day for you.
Perfect. We see this a little bit in Australia, sadly, with people, quoting, and we always say we're just trying to educate, not dictate, on this podcast, where we talk a lot about sort of management strategies for populations here of deer species here in Australia, because you can essentially do whatever you want. You know, we've got the management strategies of just shooting the big ones and just shooting bucks and stags, and we've got the management strategies of shooting everything that you see, and we've got everything in between. So and everyone's got their own opinions, which I think, as long as you're respectful of other people's opinions and how they're trying to manage their population on a herd or on the property, I mean, it's up to them. But you see a lot of people, especially on social media, where it's very easy nowadays to have a great opinion of how everyone should hunt and manage their herds. You see people sort of vocalizing things and saying, I think people just need to look after their own little patch of land or whatever they're hunting and not worry so much about what other people are doing. But hence the world at the moment. Everyone's got an opinion.
Yep, that's right.
Was there any other factors, I guess, probably more of a logistics-wise, we've got a rough breakdown of the sort of subspecies of caribou and the rough price and stuff. Was there any other factors that you'd sort of warn or discuss with people if I came to you and said, hey, I really want to chase a caribou in the future? Is there anything, other than, sort of maybe fitness, price, and then sort of whether bow or rifle? Is there any other factors that you normally ask or discuss with people around caribou hunts?
More than anything, it's just weather. Everything, the further north you go to hunt in North America, the worse the weather gets. So most people, they may be prepared financially for the hunt. They may be in good shape, but realize you're going into some of the worst weather that this country has to throw at it, and rain and snow and wind, and it may turn in more of a mental game than anything. In Alaska, all of our hunts, we plan, say, 10-day hunts, but we realize half those days will be lost or useless days because of weather, where you'll be stuck in your tent or it'll be unhuntable. And that's why those hunts are so long most of the time, is because we plan on losing half the days. That's just kind of a rule of thumb. Sometimes we'll have hunters go unsuccessful just because they never got to get out of the tent for their whole hunt. And then it turns into a mental game and what you can withstand. So just have eyes wide open when you're planning a trip to the North Country, booking a hunt. Anything north of Montana, it can turn ugly quick.
I guess that's probably a bit of an important question to ask, especially in the recent topics that we've sort of spoken about, and especially going into the next topic, which is sheep. All these tags sort of fetch fairly big price points. How does it work with, like you go on, I spend 50 grand on a Yukon moose hunt. It's a 10-day hunt. It snows for 10 days and we don't leave the wall tent. Like, do they go, James or Austin, this has never happened before. This is ridiculous, mate. Like, come back in 2 years' time, and I'll do you a slightly, like, a discounted hunt where you only pay for the tag? Or is it like, sorry, mate, that was yarn? And and I realize it varies hugely between outfitter, but what's the sort of, what's most likely, what's your feel with what's going to happen in that scenario?
It's 50-50, honestly. About half the outfitters will say, okay, let's bring you back at a discount. We want you to come, whatever it may be. And the other half say, you know what, you got to stay in business. I can't bring you back at a discount. So I'm sorry, that's weather. So it's probably half and half, and you just have to accept that risk going into it. Nobody's going to guarantee anything. It's still hunting. So you just have to hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yeah, see, that's wild, thinking that you could potentially spend all that money, I guess, and then you're giving it to chance, really. But it was a statistic somewhere where it's like the biggest determining factor for Dall sheep success in Alaska was just purely what weather you got in a year. Whether it was like, if it was a really shit year and the visibility was poor, then the success rates on Dall sheep hunt was like terrible. Whereas like if it was a really good year for visibility and, you could see really well and, got plenty of hunting days, and the hunter success rate for Dall sheep went up exponentially, So yeah, it sounds like weather is the biggest factor in a lot of these hunts. And it's sort of it's a bit scary in the sense that you can train and be the most, like, you can have the best gear, you can be shooting out to a Coke can size at 100 yards for a moose hunt, and, you could be prepared to carry out 70 kilos, so 150 pounds, just say, of moose meat on your back, and you Cam Haines, and you're an animal, and you're ready for this hunt, and then you get sleeting rain and fog for 10 days and you don't even, hear or see a moose and get outside. It's scary,
Extremely. Yeah. Extremely scary. But that's the cards we've been dealt. Bad weather up here.
Yeah, but I guess that adds to the hunt. Like if you do get trapped in a tent for 3 or 4 days, and then you finally get out, and you don't have cabin fever anymore, and you stretch your legs, and you get it done on the last afternoon. That's what we dream about, I guess, as hunters, and sort of aspire for. So I guess all we can do is be as prepared mentally, physically, gear wise as we can possibly for these hunts, and hopefully we can capitalize when the opportunity hopefully presents itself. But I think was there any other areas in the world or any other herds or hunts that you wanted to discuss regarding caribou, or are you pretty happy with maybe you want to tell us about your caribou hunt?
No, I think we did pretty good. I think my caribou hunt was just a bigger realization that I need to plan a hunt sooner than later. And that's what we did. We took a few of the guys here from Huntin Fool, went to northern Alaska, and we just got dropped off by an airplane transporter because we didn't have to have a guide. and we shot caribou, most of us. One of us didn't get one. And then we came back. But yeah, there's no guarantee that hunt will even exist next year, right? The locals in Alaska are trying to shut down those hunts, especially to non-residents. They just despise non-residents from outside of Alaska coming in and shooting their food source. It's a political, social issue for sure.
Yeah, wow. So, I mean, if I'm the message here that should be hopefully coming across loud and clear is if you want to hunt a caribou, there is no time like the present. So please go and talk to, an outfitter independently if you want, or, talk to one of the awesome team members at Huntin Fool and start planning your hunt, because by the sounds of it, opportunity in that realm is dropping off quite quickly, and especially with the native indigenous population trying to close up those opportunities to non-residents. It sounds like things are only going to get more difficult, things are only going to get more expensive, and opportunities are going to quickly decline. So if you ever want to chase a caribou, it's probably going to be worth booking in that hunt as soon as you guys can. So please, either reach out to the Huntin Fool team. We've said it a couple of times now. You can email applications at huntinfool.com. You'll be hooked up with a hunting advisor there, or just use the huntinfool.com website and go to the contact us and fill in the details there, and you'll be quickly sent over to one of the Huntin Fool advisory team, and they'll be able to sort you out really, really quickly on a hunt for whatever species you want to target. So make sure you're organising that sooner rather than later.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, guys, for listening to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Hopefully you're inspired to get out there and chase some species that I think really do resonate with a lot of people, being moose and caribou. A lot of people have it on their bucket lists of hunts they'd like to do at some stage. Hopefully we've sort of given you some information about pricing for these hunts, and obviously just speaking about the caribou, probably something you want to tick off sooner rather than later if you ever aspire to have a beautiful caribou bull sitting on your wall at home here in Australia or New Zealand or wherever you're listening to in the world. So make sure you get the ball rolling and start organising those hunts. But once again, thank you, Austin, for giving us your time. To the loyal listeners, thank you for tuning in on another episode of the podcast, and we'll speak to you all soon next week. We've got sheep and mountain goats, so make sure to stick around and chime in for that one. So talk to you all soon. Thank you very much, Austin, and see you later, guys. If you're sick of having dull knives in the kitchen or whilst out fishing or hunting, then check out the Kimbo Rolling Knife Sharpener. Its easy design means anyone can have knives razor sharp in minutes. Australian owned and backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, it's a perfect gift for anyone that loves cooking or in the outdoor space. Use code TWINELEMENTS15 to get 15% off your next order. God, I love these podcasts. Every time I do one, it just gets me so fired up for organising some trips in the future. It, like I said earlier, it's something, a moose hunt's very close to my heart, and actually a hunt I'd like to do in 2026. So I've already started talking to the Huntin Fool team and talking to a couple of outfitters, potentially in Newfoundland or Canada, just looking at pricing, opportunity and size of moose. But it's just a hunt that I've always wanted to do, saving up the pretty pennies hopefully to do that. So yeah, it's been really, really good just hearing all the options of what hunts are available. You always learn something, even for myself who's talking to outfitters at the moment. You always learn something new and just increase that knowledge. So if that's you and you've always wanted to go on a caribou hunt or a moose hunt, hopefully you really enjoyed this podcast. If you're just listening to it for general knowledge, hopefully you can help someone else in the future with booking a hunt or sending them the right direction. And hopefully it gets at least one person out chasing a moose or a caribou. That's all our goal is here at Twin Elements, just to get you guys to go out there and experience the world of hunting. It's doing this stuff for you guys keeps us really fired up and motivated to keep on putting the material out there and just keep educating you guys on what opportunities are available, but also some hunt tactics and backpacking tips and tricks. And what we also like to do is answer your listener questions. So If you guys have a listener question, please email us at info@twinelements.com.au with the subject line FAQ, or send us a message on one of our main Instagram accounts, being Twin Elements, Aidan Doomstis Outdoors, or James Doomstis Outdoors, and we will answer your question on a future podcast. So this question we get a fair bit, and it is, when you're overseas on your US hunts, have you been able to bring the elk meat back to Australia? And how did you go bringing the antlers and cape back with you? So it's pretty hard to bring the meat back, and to be 100% honest, for the cost, you can't do it. Essentially, it's just restricted with the biosecurity laws. There is diseases in the US that we don't have in Australia, so it's very hard to bring meat back to Australia. But the thing is, personally, I think the cost of it too, like I've always eaten the animals that I've hunted over there, and then we've just donated the meat to our friends who have, generously lent us some gear, or, lent us a truck last time, for example. So we are more than obliging, and they live off elk meat and deer meat and antelope meat all year round. So, I would happily give them the meat to eat it. Aidan and I over here hunting all the time, we've got plenty of venison ourselves. Plenty of pig, plenty of goat. And so, me lugging 100 kilos of elk meat, yes, it would be good. But I think logistically, just the costs, even if I could, getting it here probably wouldn't warrant, it just purely on the fact that I've got so much meat in a freezer here in Australia already. So the meat we donate over there, there's heaps of options. You can donate it to food banks and homeless shelters and that sort of thing, that just help people in need and really need it. So there is plenty of opportunities if you go over there and you can't take the meat home, whether it's from Australia or New Zealand. And you can donate it to a really good cause. Definitely advise eating some. It's a really cool experience and tastes great. So with the antlers, you can, once the hide has been tanned over there, you can organise a export and import license. So that's just working with exporters and importers here in Australia. I personally haven't brought anything back yet, purely because of the cost of it. Getting containers becomes really expensive, and it's one of these things where I'd rather have 5 elk heads in a container, sort of assorted awkwardly, and a couple of deer hopefully, and whatever else, antelope and stuff, maybe the sneaky little bear if we can get it, all in a big box or a container, rather than just one elk skull, because the costs do stack up quite quickly, and so often you're paying for size of a container plus weight. And so yes, it may be slightly heavier, but the box size isn't going to be that much bigger, sending a heap of trophies home as opposed to sending just one sort of set of antlers back. Haven't sent anything back yet, but hides need to be tanned, and obviously you can't bring back any brain material. You need to boil your skulls out and clean them, and get certificates from a taxidermist for them as well. So something to be looked into the future for us for sure. Me personally getting a few skulls back and hopefully adding to them shortly in September with Aidan. Hopefully it might warrant, if we have a really good September, bringing back all these trophies and getting them back into Australia, but haven't done so yet. But that's the process of getting your trophies home. Sadly, you can't bring the meat, but you can rest assured knowing that it's going to a great cause over there, or going to friends and family. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that podcast. A few last wrap-ups. We'd just like to thank you guys, our loyal listeners, for also supporting us and buying some of our prints. So we've got 40 prints up available on the website, and we know it's you guys that are actually buying a whole lot of them because you're using the code The Twin Elements Podcast to get 10% off your print. So since we shared this with you guys, it was just something Aidan and I discussed about, you guys are supporting us through listening to the podcast. The least we can do is support you guys by giving you a discount on those prints. We've had a heap of people order it off the podcast. So thank you very much for supporting Aidan and I by ordering one of those prints. We know you guys are going to love them. Aidan and I both have a few in our house, even personally, even though we've taken them because they mean so much to us, but the quality is insane. Whenever people come around, we get plenty of compliments on them. Sitting here working at my desk and looking at an elk one at the minute, which I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, purely just because it can distract me a little bit at times, but it's an awesome print. It's one of my favorite photos that we've got. So yeah, if you want to check out the prints, like I said, there's 40 up there on the website. So jump on, order one, and make sure to use the code The Twin Elements Podcast for 10% off your print. Well, as you guys may be aware, we've got our Northern Territory adventure starting on the YouTube channel shortly. So the first one's going to be dropping Wednesday the 16th of July at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. That is on the Twin Elements YouTube channel. So make sure to jump over there, subscribe if you haven't already. This is going to be another little mini series where there's 6 episodes coming out. We're hunting buff, we're hunting boars, we're hunting bantang. It is super action packed. Heaps of live footage and so many critters hit the deck. It's a little bit different to what we've previously done just because there is so much action in there. We've kept these films actually a little bit shorter, sort of averaging around that 10-minute time. But yeah, you guys are going to absolutely love them. Still super cinematic and just action packed. So make sure to jump onto the Twin Elements YouTube and check them out. And we know you guys are going to love them. One for the calendar is the 1-year anniversary of Venture Hunting and Outdoors. So Aiden and I will be down at their Springwood store in Brisbane on the 9th and 10th of August. So they're going to be opening the doors to the public. They're going to have huge giveaways, huge prizes. It's going to be an action-packed event. Make sure to please come down, support the hunting community. And it'd be awesome just to see you guys there. Come down, say hello. Please make sure you introduce yourselves. Aiden and I love chatting to you guys who are our loyal listeners, but also just avid hunters and outdoorsmen. So make sure to come down, introduce yourself to Aiden and I, and we're excited to meet you guys and have a chat there. So that is on the 9th and 10th of August. There's going to be heaps of prizes. So if you're in Brizzy or abroad, come to the event and support the hunting community, and we'll see you all there. Well, that wraps up another podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening, our loyal listeners. We really appreciate all the love and support we get on the podcast. Please make sure, if you think that this podcast or this resource could be something where you could be sharing with someone else, don't hold it. Don't keep it into yourself. Tell one of your hunting mates. There's plenty of different topics coming up. We're obviously in the midst of the big game hunting model, breaking that down with Austin and talking about what hunting opportunities lie across the ditch. But yeah, there's plenty of other topics coming up, whether it's backpacking, hunting buff and bantang here in Australia. There's plenty of other different topics that will be dropping, and the podcast drops every week, as you guys are very familiar with. So there's plenty of resources to be shared around, so don't keep it to yourself. Make sure to tell your mates. Please also remember to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast. It just helps it with all the algorithms, everything like that, and get shared abroad to other suggested hunters and outdoorsmen like yourselves to potentially listen to the podcast. So if you guys could do that for us as a small favor, we would really, really appreciate it. But once again, thank you to you guys who support the channel. Aiden and I are putting a lot into it this year, and we really want to see this platform grow. So if you guys could share it with your friends and please subscribe, review, and rate the podcast. It would mean the world to us. But for now, we'll catch you next time on the Twin Elements Podcast.